Okay, we're live. This is Hikosaemon with the Ranger edition of the 2.5 Oyajis. We're actually just wrapping up. Steve and I were just having a great conversation, and we actually covered all the. It's not going to get any better than the conversation we just had warming up. So we are going to wrap up. It's been very good seeing you all tonight.
It's been great. Thank you for showing up as well.
Oh, it's been great. Yeah. So. It's one of those things. You always have this dilemma when you're warming up, and I don't know why. With you, we never have technical problems setting up. It's almost like a tradition that we have technical problems every time. But
yeah. Because whenever we do this, it's always straight through. We're good to go. We're on there, and there's no issues whatsoever.
Who can figure it out? Who can figure it out? So, as a result, we had all this time to start talking, and every time we started talking about something, I was like, oh, we have to stop talking. This is good material. I have to hold it in, have to stop. And then we'd talk about something else. It's like, oh my God, that's good material too. And it's pretty much just going to be downhill from now.
Uphill.
Uphill.
We hit the valley, and now we're going to go uphill and then take a nice, good ride downhill as we close out at 11 o'clock.
Yeah. So I have to say as well, just before we get into this, I mean, I think we should set ground rules, which is that, I feel an obligation in Victor's absence. For those of you who don't know, I believe he has contracted the Ebola disease. He's not feeling very well anyway. I talked to him today. He's not up to it, but I kind of feel obligated to hold the torch in his presence, and especially given that Steve has a hairstyle much like my own. I think he can take my role for tonight. And I'll try to just be obnoxious and disagree with everything he says, which is going to be difficult because I pretty much disagree with everything. I mean, we're both very agreeable people, aren't we?
We are. We get along so well. We have very similar mindsets.
No, we don't. No, we don't. See, I'm practicing.
You're practicing already.
Yes.
Well, what I was going to say is, even when we don't agree, we do it nicely and cordially.
That's right. He punches like a girl. So, it's pretty simple and smooth. But, there's lots of stuff to talk about. So I guess, first of all, I should introduce, for the people who don't know, the man, Steve Miller, Qiranger. It's Qiranger. That's how I should pronounce it, right?
Qiranger.
Qiranger. So, yeah, I mean, you are like, you're an actual broadcast, like commercial media, as well as blogging and podcasting and all that cool stuff.
Yeah, I do it all.
Yeah, and what your real project that's been standing out to me lately has been your Asian News podcast, which has gotten off to a kind of a rip-roaring start. I mean, I think anyone who looks at that will look at that and assume it's being done by like a mega corporation of some sort, but it's all just you.
It's just me. My wife, I will give my credit, give a lot of credit to my wife, because she's another news junkie like me. And even though I spent hours sifting through all the regional news to come up with the stories for the 3 different podcasts, she will feed me other stories as well, and help with some emails going back to some of the consultants to get things underway.
Aliens discovered in New Hampshire.
There we go.
There we go. Big story this week. Okay, so she actually helps you out. She shows an interest and helps you out with that stuff.
A little bit. I mean, a lot of it is that it's so fluid. The thing with the news industry is it's very fluid. So with the Asia brief every morning, I just wrapped up my notes for tomorrow morning's broadcast, which means I have the bullets of what I want to cover for tomorrow morning, but then I have to get up at the crack of dawn to fine-tune those and get even more information before I put the podcast out before 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And then the whole week-long process of putting together the weekly podcast, which brings in consultants from around the world.
We've had some good people come on, including me, of course, which I thought was a genius move.
The August 15th edition, celebrating the end of World War II. No, but she's really good at helping me identify topics and guests for Asia Now, the more discussion-oriented podcast. That one's a little bit more difficult to do because it's not just news, it's not just information and collating information throughout the week.
Yeah. I mean, what is your process for that? Do you actually go and look at the sites, or do you use RSS, or do you use like Twitter or stuff like that? I use Flipboard and RSS for everything.
Well, I use a lot. So I would say, if you take a look at an average Asian News Weekly podcast, the one that comes out on Friday, which is the digest of the week's news, the 30-minute podcast probably brings in close to 60 or 70 different sources for about 5 different stories.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't include the time that I need to track down, say, consultants from the Rand Corporation or the Milken Group or individuals like yourself who are knowledgeable about different aspects in the area.
But of course, I have nothing better to do. But how do you get like the real professional good people to come on your show?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I did when I started this is I made a conscious decision to treat this as a business, to treat this as a news organization. So I'm a member of the AAJA, the Asian American Journalists Association here in Seoul. I'm active in the chapter. The podcast is syndicated on both the Korea Times here in Seoul and Japan Today in Tokyo.
That's right, Japan Today. That's right. This is featured regularly now. This is syndicated on the Japan Today site, which is one of the biggest internet news sites in English in Japan.
Right. So it lends a certain credibility as to what I produce because major newspapers that also use the Rand Corporation for stories in their articles see that their product is that my product is going up on these other websites. So when I contact the media relation office, I can say, this is the podcast, this is the topic that I need help on, and this is the podcast, and it's syndicated on these sites as well.
Cool. So for people, who follow my thing, I do like an hour of just random blabbering every Sunday night. And I pretty much just put together all the week's news that I picked up out of my RSS and that I retweeted from other people, and I kind of filter through it on Flipboard. I try to pick out. I always aim to get like 6 topics, but I always end up with like 20, and I try to say as much as possible. I cover nothing, and then I finish in a broken mess at the end of every show. And for me, it's really hard to filter down. It is really hard to cut down, and especially over a week. So much happens in this part of the world, and you're covering a bigger geography. You're covering, all of pretty much East Asia.
Asia Pacific.
Right. So, how do you pick 5 stories for a whole week out of East Asia? What's your focus? What's your motivation?
Well, the focus really is trying to not only share the news. So, I look at it in a different way. You're saving everything for Tokyo Tonight. I look at it as throughout the week, I share stories throughout the day on both Twitter and Facebook. And these are stories that may or may not make it into the broadcast, either in the Asia Brief or in Asia News Weekly. So at the end of the week, I start looking at various threads and what are various themes. And by then, usually there are 3, 4, or 5 stories that I think are important, but also would get people to start discussing them, or will elicit comments back. I could fill 2, 3, 4 hours of just relaying the news. I'm trying to pare it down to just important stories that I think will resonate with more people and get more discussion.
Right. So your aim is to start discussion, to trigger discussion in other people. That's how you decide what the most newsworthy topics that you want to handle are.
Well, I don't want to say it's the most newsworthy because when I describe the show, it's not the biggest stories in Asia Pacific. It's some of the biggest stories, and a digest of this. And that's one of the reasons why I started with the Asia Brief in the mornings, is that it allows me to cover more stories that may or may not end up in the weekly podcast. And it's also one of the reasons why I tacked on to the end of the weekly podcast another section called the Weekly Brief, which has a really quick bulleted list of several stories that are very important that I may have talked about earlier on in the week, but they're not really discussion generators. It's just that this is something you need to know if you're interested in the Asia Pacific region.
Yeah. And I must have, I have the same kind of thing in terms of I show stuff not so much to trigger discussion. I guess if I have a motivation, it's I tweet everything that I pick up from my RSS, and I go back through my Twitter feed, which I put into Flipboard, which I love as a way to read through the stuff that I've picked up, and I try to pick out from that. If the stuff is still interesting to me a week later, but I look at it from a perspective of I try to inform a discussion or give people the background I want people to have so that they can see things the way I see them, which is hard because, news doesn't like to, nowadays every news is packaged so fast and slick in one angle and 30-second sound bites, and there's no time given to give people context on news anymore, actually. It really, news really always used to be about trying to give a balance, trying to give a, all sides, and people used to take their time about news, and it's really kind of gone nowadays.
Well, no, I agree with that. That's one of the reasons, like the stories that I do pick, each story isn't just based off, say, one article printed. It's usually between 6 or 7 different articles from multiple different sources. Yeah. So you get the conservative paper, you get the progressive paper, and you get both sides there. You can tell that story, and then I can editorialize and say this is what I think, and then ask the question, where do you fall in this? Who's right, who's wrong?
Okay, Hong Kong, where do you fall? Who's right, who's wrong?
Who's right, who's wrong? I don't think it's a matter of who's right, who's wrong.
Oh, come on, that's a pick a side.
No. I am going to pick a side, and the side is I think it's incredibly naive of both the Occupy Central members and the student groups to think that Beijing is just going to roll over. I think we're seeing what Beijing planned all along is that they can't go in there like Tiananmen Square, but they can wait things out.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer that something will happen because there's so much negative press about China right now and the way it's handled Beijing that something needs to happen. What that will be, I don't know. I do think there may be a creative way for CY Leung to step down. It wouldn't be the first time that Hong Kong chief executive has stepped down because of a negative row with the population. He's widely unpopular, but it wouldn't be just like he's stepping down at a disgrace. It'd be some kind of promotion out of his position, way up in the party or something.
But it does appear, someone mentioned that there were like free video games being given away somewhere, and all of a sudden the whole protest kind of emptied on Monday, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, so you had the holiday last week, and then as the week progressed, it was widely anticipated that the numbers would drop. People had been gone for a week. They want to go back to their families. They had students, had exams. They were just, knackered. And, there was some concern what would happen if they didn't clear out those areas Monday morning. And when nothing did happen, you saw people come back to the streets that evening. And then, go ahead.
I had an idea it was kind of petering out, but so it's kind of, so what, it's going to get big again on the weekend, you think?
I'm not sure if it's going to get bigger on the weekend because, like you said, it's petering out. Monday they saw more people come out, not the tens and 20s of thousands like were there over last weekend, but more people did come out Monday evening, and then throughout the week it just gets smaller and smaller, especially now since the government, in principle, and the opposition groups have been having these preliminary talks, and then Friday at 4 p.m. they're going to have formal discussions.
Sorry, I was going to say I have a guilty confession to make about Hong Kong. I feel white guilt about Hong Kong.
I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that a lot of, say, Commonwealth and UK people feel about just handing it over and hoping for the best.
But not even that. I mean, at the same time, it's kind of, we have this thing at the moment. The British press obviously has a very keen interest in Hong Kong. A lot of Hong Kong is the one. Everyone that could get a passport. In Britain, all of a sudden stopped giving Hong Kong people British passports ahead of 1997 because everyone wanted one, and they kind of left them there. But the ones that could get it are in writing, editorials in the UK at the moment. And everyone talks about the moral obligation of Britain to hold China to the deal. The deal supposedly being that, Hong Kong will get to have, democracy and would get to have a separate system at least until whatever it is, 2047, I think.
2047, yeah.
So, but the thing is, it's kind of, there is a slight smidge of hypocrisy that Britain made PRC sign up to this deal promising to give them democracy. When you remember the last governor who speaks up all the time is a white guy from Britain who was sent over, appointed to be the king of Hong Kong, and they never had, Britain had Hong Kong for 300 years. They could have given them democracy. They had democracy in Britain the whole time. They had democracy in New Zealand. They had it everywhere else, but they didn't want to give it to a colony that they couldn't really control all the people. And they never actually did the democracy thing, forgetting the fact that they got Hong Kong in the first place in order to, force them all to be heroin addicts and to sell drugs to China. So, when you start talking about a moral obligation on Britain, I feel hypocritical. I feel like it's the right thing to do, but we really shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, and C.Y. Leung makes a very good point. If you look over the history and all the other former governors were appointed, there was no voting. You do have more privileges in terms of voting for the chief executive under Beijing's plan that you had in the past. It's not what you wanted, it's not what you expected, but it is more than what was in the past.
Yeah, more people voted for Leung than voted for Patton. So I don't know. It's kind of, the Brits, you have to admit, kind of have their own. At the same, obviously, the Brits always like to make a big deal. Of course, Britain never has had to really confront its colonial wrongs anywhere in any great measure. And so everyone feels very comfortable. Oh, we made the place lovely. We gave them nice big banks, and look at how happy they are and how miserable they are. They have to go back to the horrible Chinese, which they are. But yeah, at the same time, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know. A part of me feels like, yes, if it's what the people of Hong Kong want, we should all support their basic pursuit of human rights and happiness. But at the same time, if PRC wants to call us ugly colonial hypocrites, I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to be quiet now. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it.
No, I agree with that. I mean, you can't advocate for universal suffrage and then not deny that you grant it as well.
I totally want China to stop doing what we did and do what I now say you should do now that we have no responsibility whatsoever for it. Yeah, but but that said, all of that said, what the people are asking for in Hong Kong, and there is this thing which China argues with regards to Hong Kong as well. The mainland papers have put out all these editorials talking about the need to maintain social order, and they do maintain this line, which I actually think is actually patronizing and racist towards themselves. It's kind of like a like self-hating Chinese people, that they say this idea that democracy, people need to understand democracy just doesn't work with us Chinese people.
Oh yeah.
It's just incompatible. Taiwan, Taiwan's not doing bad. The last fist fights last year. I got to admit, okay, Singapore doesn't really work. Hong Kong, it's not really, never been allowed to start. It's kind of hard to get the right example, but at the same time, give yourself some credit. I don't know, it's kind of tough, isn't it? I don't know. I always feel conflicted about Hong Kong. I feel like I'm on their side, but I'm just not quite sure how vocal I should be about it.
Never be quiet. Go with your passion. Go with your soul, sir.
I like pizza. I don't know what to say. So yeah, no, Hong Kong, I don't know, it's tough. It's kind of hard to tell, I guess. Obviously they're not taking referendums at the moment on how popular this thing is. That's the whole idea.
That's the whole mess too, because C.Y. Leung is reported to have all these ties with the mob, and he reported that he's the one who sent out the triads, or the government sent out the triads. I've seen screenshots of text messages offering up to 1,000 Hong Kong dollars to two people to disrupt the protests. You have photographic evidence that may or may not be manipulated, but uniformed police officers
out of uniform.
Yeah, it's like, come on.
At least they're not on camels with swords. That's a big improvement over other parts of the world. But yes, there's always somewhere worse off, I guess. But like you said in the beginning, in the end of the day, what is the end game really? Obviously, they're opposing. Are they going to be able to impact and have free elections? I can't really see that happening, and that doesn't even happen in, frankly, places like Singapore, even, for example.
Yeah, I think the students are, and even the Occupy Central leaders are coming to the realization that as much as they want that, it's not going to happen.
But is that a reason to give up? Is that a reason to give up? That's what I mean.
Well, no, and I think that's what they're doing is that, and I've heard a few quotes from a different, from like BBC and Voice of America speaking with students, is that they've come to the realization that Beijing is going to do what it's going to do. They might be able to impact some small change, but they feel that if they didn't rise up and make their position known, it would be worse
assume that
because
they're okay.
it would be assuming that they were just okay with whatever Beijing did, that they needed to take a stand, even if it wasn't going to be successful. At least they made themselves known.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the worst outcome, which could have been the outcome even if they had done nothing, it could have been the similar worst case would be exactly as you say, that China starts putting mainland troops on the streets of Hong Kong and starts, trying kind of more forcefully speeding up the integration. And that doesn't, I don't think that's in anyone's interest. But this is the thing that scares me about China. When people talk about, I mean, when a lot of people get nervous about China and Japan bumping up over the Senkaku Islands and stuff like that, and a lot of people say, well, China would never do that because, it would be, they wouldn't sacrifice the economy for the sake of a stupid nationalist, chest beating contest about some 200-year-old historical wrong with Japan. And I say to them, no, that's exactly the problem. They would have.
They would.
The party there that runs that country would be prepared to give up 10 years economic growth for a political PR boost, knocking up against Japan. And Japan knows that, and that's why everyone here is freaking out.
Yep.
But that's what everyone's got to deal with. Including, I mean, Hong Kong's closer to it than everybody else, of course. They're right in the middle of it. So what's going on in Taiwan lately? I mean, is the Asian news guy, and how is Taiwan? I've seen some stuff of Taiwanese looking at this. Taiwan's got its own very interesting political landscape, but
well, I mean, you have the sunflower movement over there with the occupation of the houses. They're really taking a close look at how China responds because they're in this process of trying to renegotiate the cross-strait deal and boost economic ties. And they're, for the large part, they're freaking out because whatever Beijing ends up doing with Hong Kong, they know they're next. They know they're next. So they're actually offering their words of support. They're offering,
Well, a crackdown in Hong Kong would really affect the credibility of Ma and the KMT, obviously. Like their ability to say that there's a positive, rosy future being closer to China would take a big hit in credibility.
Oh yeah, it would torpedo it completely.
And it's a pretty finely balanced scene there between the independents, the Democrats, and the KMT, right? So I suppose and China must be aware of that as well. They must be aware if they're a little bit if they get heavy-handed with Hong Kong, it is gonna tip the balance the other way, I guess, for Taiwanese people.
Well, yeah, I mean, last week I had Scott Harold from Iran Corporation on the show, and we were specifically talking about Xinjiang, which China has the ability to be very heavy-handed in that northern region to suppress the terrorism going on up there. Yeah. And I asked him, well, would there be a chance for them to employ the same tactics with Hong Kong? And he said they could. It would be unwise because of the global implications for that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that is a difference with the Northwest. It's isolated. It's hard to cover. Right. And frankly, as well, I mean, what they're dealing with up there. There is a tendency, I mean, I get a little bit frustrated with the way the West covers pretty much every single country in Asia, including China and including Japan. There is a tendency to kind of scoff at everything that China kind of does when, legitimate or illegitimate. And I particularly have a problem when they're sympathetic to China when it's against Japan and scoff of China on everything else. It gets to me. But the thing with the Northwest as well, to give a moment of some credit and sympathy to China as well, you talk about ISIS. You talk about talk about the jihadis and the foreign. There's a whole bunch of Chinese people in Syria at the moment. They're from that region. I mean, to say it is actually. I mean, no one likes to give China credit or Russia credit that there are actually Chechens and jihadis, but they're there. And they're doing crazy stuff. So I don't know, and how do you deal with a problem like that? I mean, even when you're a huge police totalitarian state like China, and they're trying to squash it, and they can't. It's
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that we talked about because I asked Scott, is it really effective? And there's some successes, but I personally think China is going about it not entirely the most effective way because they're just clamping down on Muslims, period, and that. Whether or not it's like trying to throw a big blanket over, a small problem, and you're just going to, not get what you need.
Well, the fact that they put the academic in jail for life for
separatism,
for doing an essay about independent about independence. I mean, yeah, that's not good. Yeah, you are going to facilitate the radicalization movement when you do stuff like that. But yeah, and speaking of, something that struck me today, I saw that, did you read today, sort of outside of our region, but Canada authorized bombing on ISIS today?
I didn't read that. I did see that Australia carried out its first sortie earlier this week, not necessarily an attack, but they flew their first sortie this week as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Australia, I kind of get. Australia kind of follows America everywhere, but I don't know. When the Canadians have passed a resolution to bomb you, you must be doing something really, really bad.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure the resolution must have been, the House agrees that we will commence bombing raids on Iraq. Sorry.
Yeah, I apologize.
What are they going to do? Drop like Bryan Adams CDs all over them or something? I would surrender immediately. I don't know if that's the strategy, but yeah. I mean, and what are they going to do? They're going to slow down the refugee applications from the ISIS members after the war is finished, because they pretty much take anybody. They're so nice. I don't know. It's by the way, I recently cottoned on to, maybe I was missing it for a long time, but I kind of randomly stumbled across a Vice News documentary, and the first ones I found out were ones of people who were, one of them embedded 5 episodes, 20 minutes each, embedded with ISIS as well as with other groups, with the FSA and other groups, and then there was the Central African Republic, genocide problems, and they had a person running around in Bangui while there were massacres going on, and then they had the Ebola thing, and they actually have people like with Handycam in Sierra Leone, and I was like, damn, I haven't seen like news like this, like someone being there and right in the middle and actually just covering it, and not like embedded with American soldiers marching through, and not like Pentagon briefings, but actually just being in these places and talking with the people involved. Watching it made me realize, when I was a kid and I'd watch like 60 Minutes, and people used to smuggle reels of film out of this sort of coverage, and people would watch it, and it would be what everyone would watch, and it's kind of, that's all kind of gone to mush. And I'm to see news stories that compelling is really, it's been a long time for me actually. I've been really gripped by their stuff. I mean, I know they put a lot of garbage on Vice as well, but
yeah, no, I mean, Vice is doing some really great stuff. I mean, really good stuff.
I've just been so impressed. Just the idea. I mean, honestly speaking, well, I mean, I secretly hoped I wouldn't get a high enough grade to get into law school, so I could go and do what these guys are doing. To go off to some crap hole swamp in the middle of nowhere with a handycam, and that's what I wanted to do. I mean, so I must admit, I really like that. That's what's missing. You know what I mean? Everything is spin, everything's an angle, everything. Okay, a Democrats are for this or against it. And what am I supposed to say?
Right.
It's just gotten so retarded. Everything. Speaking of retarded, Kim Jong-un, he's disappeared. What happened to him?
Oh, that is a good question. So he's been gone for over a month. Everyone says he's fine. He's in control.
Rumor has it he's actually been on a secret romantic getaway with Abe.
Oh, there you go.
That's it.
There you go.
The Sankei Shimbun is going to print something tomorrow, from what I hear.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. He's missed a parliament meeting, which isn't out of the ordinary. Both his grandfather and his father had missed that before. He missed another party meeting Tuesday, I believe. But the big one we're kind of looking out for is Friday, the anniversary of the Workers' People Party, Workers' Korea Party, WKP. But anyway, the Communist Party. The Communist Party. So the founding of the Communist Party, the anniversary is coming up on Friday, and we're all looking to see if he makes an appearance, because if he doesn't, it would signal that whatever illness he has, it's more than just quote-unquote some discomfort. It's something more serious that he can't go out in public. And there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not he's gravely ill, whether or not he might lose a leg, whether he's just playing the absentee game to try and diversify people's interests and try to. I think you can use
you're using very loose language here. I think you should use the technical news terminology. Is he just fucking with us?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean that could be it as well. I mean, you just never know what he's up to. And that's, and I mean, we didn't find out that Kim Jong-il was dead for what, almost a month. After he died, it's finally, oh yeah, he's dead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a weird country, right? I mean, all of a sudden, like the head of the army shows up in South Korea and says, "Hey guys, who's gonna buy me a drink?"
Well, that was really interesting too, because that was just on 24 hours notice. It's like, hey, we want to come tomorrow, and they're like, oh,
And they
okay.
flew directly south, right? I mean, they could have just been like shot down anytime.
Well, yeah, the way I understand it happened from my consultant over at Crisis Group is that they phoned up. The ministry here talked about it. They said okay, flew down. They had all their meetings in Incheon, and then they flew back that day.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. But yeah, and I think I read so. I think it was you tweeted it. I was just flicking through your recent tweets, and I saw, are they just setting us up for a surprise? And they and they do this thing. I mean, and again, this is why when you talk about, and this is another thing we were talking about just before the show, Japan plays the diplomacy game with North Korea, and the tactics. I mean, the diplomacy style, if you can call it that, of North Korea. I mean, it's got to be said, Japan's kind of gone. I don't know that anyone has actually done better out of negotiating and diplomacy with North Korea than Japan. I mean, Japan's gotten away with pretty much giving them nothing, and they're pretty much still on they haven't gotten much, but they're pretty much still on a winning edge in terms of.
See, I would say just the opposite.
Oh, disagreement. I like it.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you take a look at the conversation going on for the abductees.
Right.
Everyone who really watches North Korea closely, we all pretty much had the same, reaction. It's like, well, North Korea is going to go through the motions. They aren't going to produce anything, and the hope is that okay, so as long as it looks like we're going through the motions, drop the sanctions, and that's what's going to happen. And
I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think Abe is going to drop the sanctions for Kim Jong-un.
Well, he may not drop the sanctions, but I guess my point is that why would Abe go into that when we all know that's the end game of North Korea?
Well, but you could say that was the case in the first place. And the thing was, this is the thing for me, I remember 2002 still very vividly. I was here at that time, and I was involved in a lot of the debates online before then, which you have to also understand, and this is something in terms of Japan, North Korea is very deeply embedded in Japanese society. It's not a remote. It's in some ways you could say North Korea actually is, and has always been closer. It's been closer to Japan in certain ways than it has been to South Korea. There are 300,000 North Korean loyal North Korean citizens, educated North Korean schools who live in Japan with North Korean citizenship. And on top of that, until really the collapse of the Socialist Party, which was partly, in no small part, due to the revelation of the abductions, you actually had the Socialist Party, and in Japan, the Socialist Party is affiliated with the Korean Workers' Party, not the Communist Party. The Communist Party is separate to the Socialist Party, and they wouldn't be seen dead with the Korean Workers' Party. But the leftism movement in Japan represented approximately 50% or more of the population, pretty much between 1950 and 1995. And actually took over the government in 1993, and the first thing they did was, make happy with North Korea. And you have to remember Takako Doi, who was the leader of the Socialist Party in 2002, even after 2000, was still calling North Korea a paradise on earth that Japan should emulate. And she was the head of the second biggest political party in Japan. And I lived in a home where everyone was very pro-North Korea, all Japanese, no Korean ties whatsoever, and pro-North Korea. So Japanese society, there's a very big ground, apart from the actual physical ties of people loyal to the regime and the country in North Korea, there's been a long time. By the way, that leftist movement, and because of this, the whole abduction thing, the whole leftist politics in Japan collapsed in the last 10 years, and this is one of the major factors in that. But you talk about the most popular prime minister in Japan, and people who anyone will tell you, in a breath, who the most successful Japanese prime minister since World War II is. Everyone says Koizumi. And it's because, and it was always this thing, that everything was politicized. Everything was a political debate, including the abductees. And it was always Right-wingers saying, look at those North Korean gangsters. They're gangsters in Japan, and they kidnap our kids and take them back to North Korea. And everyone, the North Koreans in Japan, along with the socialists that supported them and the whole half, liberal 50% of Japan, said that's just, right-wing propaganda, defamation of these very nice people. Why would they do that? We have all these North Koreans here. We'll help them. Why would they need to abduct people? And so it was such a shock when it came out that it was actually true, because even half of Japan didn't believe it. And I was involved in these discussions online. So I was saying, well, these stories sound credible to me. I mean, you hear these people, and the foreigners who are interested in the press, he was saying, no, those families, they're just right-wingers who have had their own children disappear, and they're just right-wingers, so they blame North Korea for it. And that's what a lot of people believed. So it was such a shock when it turned out to be true. And when it came out, the North Koreans were they were trying to be clever about it, right? They were trying to give them back on a string so they could kind of pull them back, or you can come and meet them in Pyongyang, but you can't take them back, and we want to hold on to them. And when they revealed them, they kind of implied, now if you drop those sanctions, we might have some more information for you. And they kind of tried to do that. And Koizumi shut everything down and took them and wouldn't give them back. And then they said, you abducted our abductees. And it all got a little bit weird, and then it kind of shut down.
Yeah. But I think Kim Jong-un is trying to do the same thing now, because it works so effectively with South Korea.
It worked effectively with South Korea?
Well, it's all this bait and switch game that South Korea and North Korea, the game that they play all the time.
But South Korea just loses. I mean, okay, they gave them Kaesong and they gave them all this stuff, which of course turned out to be a huge loss of investment and disaster. I mean, how many hundreds of millions have they given to North Korea, and what have they gotten back?
I mean, you're absolutely right. But what I'm saying is that the game that North Korea plays with South Korea, that they are so good at winning, they're trying it once more under Kim Jong-un to play with Japan, and it's not going to work. I just think it's in not poor taste. I think it was a bad decision for Abe just to go into and play the game, knowing what the game is, and knowing that you're not going to really get the results you're looking for.
Here's the thing you have to understand from Abe's perspective. It's win-win for the right wing in Japan. Either they come up with nothing, and the right wing and Japan gives them nothing, and it's like, see, we were right, we're being tough on North Korea, and we won't take this, and and it continues to raise the outrage against North Korea, which has a domestic political effect of further discrediting the left wing in Japan, and that's the other real reason he's doing this. That's the reason he's engaging them.
True.
Or Kim Jong-un pulls out some more of those abductees he had hidden in his back pocket, and he's a hero like Koizumi was. And Koizumi got those people back without giving them. He actually added to sanctions after he got those people back, so he actually gave them nothing from it. And that's where you could say, at least if you were keeping score. And the reason Japanese diplomacy, I think, has worked with North Korea is that I think Japan always understood. America got tricked into giving them a whole hundreds of millions of dollars in food and aid, and even offered to build them a light water nuclear reactor and all this sort of stuff. Everyone kind of got duped out of, into giving them a lot of money for a long time. And the reason Japan stayed out of it was Japan treats them like Japanese mob.
They should.
Well, they act exactly the negotiation tactics, the idea of sending some nice people over there with flowers, and probably it wouldn't surprise me at all if next week they're shelling South Korea again. That's mob tactics. That's mob. That's what they do. They come up, they act nice, and then all of a sudden they punch you in the face, and then they say, "Give me money," and that's exactly what they do.
I completely agree, and I just don't have time for that kind of game. So that's why I say I think it was a bad move.
Well, the thing, this is where it is the same as dealing with mob, and they are mob. That's a mob regime. I think you're right, and I agree with you to the extent that it's arguably unconscionable to deal with them at all, because they're gangsters. That's what you're going to get into. But at the same time, I still am sympathetic on the level that if there's a possibility that there are still people there alive, civilians, who remain, even if it's 40, 50 years now, they're still abductees, there is an obligation on the Japanese government to do what it can to try to still get them out. And a raid isn't going to do it. And for me, when I look at South Korea, under Kim Dae-jung, and bloody Roh went over there when he met Kim Jong-il and said, "Oh, I can't believe those Japanese trying to wailing on about their abductees." South Korea has hundreds of abductees in the north.
Yeah.
I wonder how they felt about that.
Well, it was funny. Well, right after Japan gave the list to North Korea, like 2 days later, oh, and here's our list of 700. Where are they? And then North Korea just didn't even respond.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it is. It's a game played in human misery.
Yeah.
And they play it like a game, and they play it completely immorally and unconscionably, and to manipulate the other side. And they play like gangsters. But I don't know. I mean, the thing for Abe, either they give them back and he's a hero, or they don't give them back and his opponents are discredited. So that's why he plays it. And he's not playing it to be nice. But I don't think Japan will be duped out of it. But we'll see. I mean, I certainly agree. I agree with you. I hope that they're not tricked into giving them any more. And Japan has a huge carrot to give them. That there is the normalization of diplomatic relations. Was a huge payday for South Korea, and that's what North Korea's been trying to get since they found out that South Korea got it. And if it's the sake of handing over a few people, I mean, for me, it doesn't actually make logical sense why you would hold on to abductees for a diplomatic relations package. But they don't do it, so I don't know. It's up to them. Oh, but I'm sorry, and I know that aggravates you, but it's a really big topic here, and it has a really big domestic dimension here, which isn't really well understood.
It doesn't aggravate me.
I can tell. So what else do we have? Oh yeah, we have the Korean news, Korea-Japan news, since everything is going so well between Korea and Japan right now.
Well, one last topic before we have to go. So unfortunately, and we all were expecting this, is that South Korea has decided to prosecute Tetsuya Kato, the Seoul bureau chief of the Sankei Shimbun, on charges of defamation.
Yeah. There is actually a parallel to this in Japan. There's an Australian guy called Ryan Connell, and he used to, so the Mainichi Shimbun, I don't know if you know about it, the Mainichi Shimbun is one of the major outlets, newspapers, one of the top 5, and they've got a big online English site. He was one of the editorial staff on the English site, apparently working with no cross supervision whatsoever. And he's a very talented translator and also a slightly sleazy old man. And I don't know if you've ever read, Japanese weekly magazines are kind of famous for the... I
probably read a story or there, but that's about it.
So they're famous for pretty much, if you've ever heard a really sleazy, sexual kind of urban myth or legend about Japan, chances are it was translated by Ryan Connell. He would go and pick around the most salacious stories from all the weekly magazines, and he would translate them. And he was a fantastic translator. He'd translate them with all this alliteration and kind of the Sunday, tabloid British newspaper kind of thing of, sexy secretaries, sleep with 6 shachos or something like that, in the stories. He was very clever with it. But the thing was, because this was being printed not in a weekly magazine, but in one of Japan's top 5 newspapers, English site, without it, apparently what's happening was the Japanese right-wingers, when they were having their online battles with South Korean and Chinese, people, Koreans were saying, look at how Japanese society has fallen apart, because even your leading news outlet says that this is what's normal in Japan now. And all of these right-wingers in Japan got so outraged at this guy who was just translating the Japanese weekly magazines that were owned by the major Japanese outlets. But basically, for this guy, for defaming Japan, he actually needed police protection, and he got chased out of the country, by stalking and kind of retaliation for doing a more extreme version of what we're talking about here. But all he was doing was translating Japan. He wasn't making them up. He was someone else was making them up. That was part of the problem. But he was just translating these stories.
Yeah, I mean, with South Korea, it's a little bit different. I mean. And it comes back to the defamation law here.
Yeah.
In South Korea, the defamation law says that if you share information, even if it's factual, but harms the reputation or causes financial damages to an individual, they can take you to court, even if the information is true.
Yeah.
So even though I think it was the Chosen Ilbo who first broke the story that there was this rumor that Park Geun-hye was having a tryst with some man during this sexy time with someone during the Sewol-ho sinking, because he put it out there. He doesn't have the backing of a major newspaper here in Korea. They can go after him.
Well, he does have the backing of Abe, which in this case I proved not to be helpful.
Well, no, and see that's part of it too, because now it's, oh, I'm attacking this Japanese person, I'm attacking Japan, who's saying this not nasty thing about our president.
Yeah.
You know, you don't see any condemnation over the same information in the Chosen Ilbo because of they have, you know, the blanket statement that they're a news organization, they have certain leeways, but more importantly, it would hurt her more for her to attack Korean news agency than to attack a single Japanese citizen for putting out this information.
Well, and let's be clear, they're not attacking a single Japanese citizen. They're attacking the Sankei Shimbun, and the Sankei Shimbun again has a significance that's not lost on the South Korean government. That they are one of the most right-wing, to the right of the Yomiuri. They're the most right-wing mainstream paper. They are the comfort woman fabrication is a fraud. You know.
Well, and I'll give you that, but I think even more fundamental than that, it boils down to this is a Japanese person saying that our president during the most devastating national tragedy was, you know, derelict in her duties.
Time. Well, so really, you think that it's less the political position of his newspaper that he represents, that also is Japanese, of course, and also represents the whole Japanese. You think it's just the fact that he's a Japanese citizen trumps that?
I think so. I think so. Because I mean, because a couple of years ago, you know, we had this photographer who simply just retweeted something from North Korea's Twitter account, and they locked him away for 10 months. I mean, his sentence was ultimately commuted, but I mean that was just under the national security law. So both the Lee Myung-bak and the Park Geun-hye administrations have really taken the national security law and the defamation laws to an extreme level. So much so now that the government is proposing how to monitor social media streams in real time so that the spreading of quote-unquote false rumors is nixed, and they've already said if we find someone online spreading a rumor that we think is false, we're going to prosecute them straight up.
So, and this is another thing, by the way, I mean, from everything I can discern from over here, Korea seems to have as vibrant and an online defamation culture as any of the countries in this region, including Japan. I mean, you know, Japan's pretty much the same. But you know, do you really? I mean, obviously they're going to try, and obviously online censorship is big in Korea. Do you think it's even possible to do though? I mean, are they really serious?
Well, people take it at least serious enough that Kakao, which is made by the Kakao Group and now merged with Daum, the rival to Line, people are actually leaving Kakao to go to Telegraph, which is this Russian app, which is all the messages are encrypted, so that it's outside the purview of the Korean government. So whether or not they could actually do it is one thing, but people are saying, well, you know, I'm not going to take the chance.
Wow. And by the way, in fact, do we go to that? I'm a little bit curious on what your take is. Obviously, when Lee Myung-bak was first there, like that was the high point of Japan-Korea relations in a long time, and I was very optimistic that things were going to get better. And I think there were a few incidents, obviously, towards the end of his tenure, specifically between him and Noda that happened, and specifically around, you know, trying to get an extra bone from Japan over the comfort woman thing. The thing, you know, that came up again, getting a bit more aggressive about that, and everything kind of fell apart. But I mean, what's your interpretation? I mean, things have gotten traditionally, of course, in Korea. I mean, even under the Grand, what do they call it? The Grand National Party, the Hanara. You know, they've always been a little bit. The right wing has always been, in my perception, a little bit more friendly towards Japan than the left. Things have always at least been kind of normal, if not friendly. At least they've been kind of normal and stable. You know, Lee was like that. But you can't. I would say probably right now, relations with Japan are probably the lowest they've ever been since they were established.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. I think they're at their lowest levels. I don't see really anything improving until both Park and get out of office. I mean, what was it? Just a few days ago, you had the finance ministers meet for the first time in 2.5 years.
You know, they're only two very close, very important major world economies. It's not like their finance ministers ever need to talk to each other.
Yeah, I mean, so I just don't see anything, and then
it seems so stupid. I mean, yeah, it just does. I appreciate there's some legitimate points on both sides, but really, when you just think about just being practical, I mean, you can have your fights in certain ways, but completely shutting everything down the way things are.
See, and that's the thing I really disagree with the way the PAC's handling this, is that you can disagree with Japan on the historical issues till the cows come home, but you just say that, well, until they decide that they're going to accept our view of history, we're not even going to talk to them, just seems negligent to me.
And it does create a situation which, again, and I don't think it's lost on Abe, that he's sending envoys over to North Korea left and right. They're there at the moment. They're there this week right now, talking with them right now. They've actually got better high-level contacts right now between Japan and North Korea than with South Korea.
Yeah.
And that's not good. I mean, how is that good?
It's just... it just baffles me as to why this is a good idea. But then again, if you look at PAC's international diplomacy, it actually mirrors domestic politics as well, because she's viewed as this very closed-off individual who doesn't listen. So she's going to do what she wants to do, whatever she feels is right, and that's what she's doing on the international stage too. So
as I try, I don't have much perception outside of what it is with Japan, but. I don't know. I mean, I like Lee. I like Kim. I like Kim Dae-jung. I like Lee. I kind of like. I'm always hopeful that it's going to get better, but we'll see. As you say, I can't really see a way that it's going to improve unless people just suddenly start thinking logically all of a sudden, which obviously isn't going to happen.
Well, no, and like the United States, where you have the split down the middle with the Republicans and the Democrats. Here in Korea, older generation really is behind the Saenuri Party. The younger generation is more so with the new Alliance for Democracy Party. That's why nothing's getting done. Look what happened with the Sewol. I mean, you had this right down political lines with something that should have been a breeze to go through the parliament.
And by the way, I keep reading on Korea Bang. I read Korea Bang. It's fun. I read all of them, and they had the thing. I mean, how it's getting kind of weird around like the victims' families, and you can't feel any more sympathy for anyone than the families of the victims of that. Very sinking. But now they're doing hunger strikes, and then right-wing bloggers are like having protests, eating food around the families.
Yeah. I mean, weird. The Korea Bong article came out a couple of days ago, but yeah, that particular protest happened like a month ago. And I was like, come on! I mean, this is.
I mean, the thing is, and this is the problem with all of these things. It really is. It's a really minuscule part of the society that's really making everyone kind of look really bad.
Yeah.
Well, we are kind of out of time. We were going to mention there is a super typhoon coming this week, of course. That's looking kind of crazy. It wasn't looking so bad yesterday. And there's a casino thing where they're going to actually, it looks like they're going to allow a casino in Japan on the provision that no Japanese are allowed into it.
Yeah, which is the same model as Korea, with the exception of one single casino.
Korea has casinos? I didn't even know that Korea had casinos.
Oh yeah, next time you're in Seoul, we can go down and check out the Lucky 7.
Really?
Oh yeah, there's casinos all over the place.
Because I know that Korea is really tough on gambling. And this is one of the other great ironies, that they outlawed pachinko and all the kind of normal gambling that people do. But and it was actually Abe, the previous administration of Abe, which was during Kim Dae-jung, he was going to do the same thing. He was going to actually model his legislation on South Korea's legislation to ban pachinko. And the story is that Kim Dae-jung got on the phone to him because it would have had such a devastating impact on the Korean community in Japan to shut down all the pachinko. He said, please don't do it.
Don't do it. But yeah, so here in Korea, Korean nationals cannot go into any casino with the exception of the Haiwon Casino in Gangwon-do, and that by far is the worst casino I have ever been in. And I kid you not.
You're from Arizona, so you've been to a lot of casinos, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, I used to go to Las Vegas all the time, but the thing that makes the one in Gangwon-do so bad is that because that's the only one that Koreans can go to, you go to a blackjack table, it's 5 or 6 people deep waiting for a seat. And as soon as you get up to go to the bathroom or something, that's it. You're done for the day. Whereas if you go into one of the foreigner casinos, hey, no problem. There's room everywhere to go gamble.
The great irony of the thing with Japan is that the whole idea of the casino was this was another brainchild of Shintaro Ishihara, the famous nationalist, octogenarian, governor of Tokyo. And he had all these crazy ideas. He built a new immigration center. Rather than being in the middle of the business district, he moved it to an artificial island in the middle of Tokyo Bay. And he's not a foreigner-friendly person. He's very anti-North Korea. He got the North Korean embassy shut down in Tokyo. He did a bunch of kind of stuff. And he and his friends, obviously wanted to set up a casino in his favorite part of Tokyo for him and his friends to gamble until they're dead in. And this was clearly an idea for him and his friends to make a bunch of money for the government and to allow gambling. Because he's a big mahjong player. He's a big he can tell he's a gambler. So the idea that it's finally going through, but it's only going to be foreigners that are allowed to use it. I just love the irony of the outcome of that. If that's how it's going to go.
Yeah. No. I mean that's.
I get it.
If you look at the research, it's probably a good move, but it's not going to bring in the tourists. It's not going to bring in. Well, it's just not going to bring in the money that you want. I mean, that was one of my big criticisms when they were trying to make Songdo the new Macau of East Asia. It's like, come on, that's why it failed. Is that you needed so much money, and you're not going to be able to get in the tourists that you are, because number one, you're not going to go to Songdo. Number two, if you're already over in the region, why the hell would I go to Tokyo or even South Korea if I want to go gamble? I'm going to go to freaking Macau, or the biggest gambling center in the world.
Well, they do point out in Japan, they cite the example of Singapore. The Sands Casino is the kind of the model that they want to use for Odaiba. Although again, even with Sands, there's a massive amount of money that's gone into that. There is, and I think there was. I know people who are over here with the Las Vegas casinos and the biggest investors in the world looking at putting money when they heard that they're going to make a legal casino in Japan. And everyone knows Japan is a country which it might be a similar problem with Korea, but Japan doesn't really have a concept of addiction or vice. The alcoholism, tobacco.
Well, yeah. Well, see, and that's my. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing here, and I guess that's my point. Is that if you don't allow the locals to participate in it, and you only rely on tourism, to go and bring in the gambling dollars, it's not going to work.
Well, they're hoping that all the Chinese will come over for the gambling, obviously, but again, why would they go beyond Macau, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you are allowing Japanese people to do it, and everyone understands, you've got this society with no concept of addiction.
I agree. It's a good call. It's a good call.
It would be a mint if they allowed the Japanese to do it, but all of a sudden it's because there's a Buddhist party in the government coalition which suddenly came out and said they wouldn't support it unless they had serious curbs on it, and this is the curb. But this kind of kills the whole idea for the people who made it, and frankly probably for a lot of the investors who would be thinking about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So then, but and personally I'm not that excited about it anyway, but it is kind of funny to watch how it unwinds. But anyway, yes, we've been doing this for an hour now. Thank you so late and on such short notice. I do appreciate it. It's always a good conversation with you, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So Victor is actually I'm going to have to line up someone else next week because Victor's also actually he's planning on having Ebola again, I believe, next week. He is actually genuinely very sick today, and everyone go and tweet him and wish him well, because I know he's not well at the moment. Next week he is going to be away, but this is really awesome. Thank you so much. 2 hours.
My pleasure.
Coming and joining. It's good to chat. And I have some people in mind for who I might try to get on for next week. But there's someone actually you should talk to. The person I'm going to try to get next week, and I think it might be impossible. I think she's in San Francisco, and this is not a good time in San Francisco right now.
It's 7:30 in the morning. Not too bad.
Early morning, yeah.
Or I guess it'd be 6:30 and start.
Yeah, and this is a video podcast, and it's a woman that I'm trying to get on, so it might be difficult. But I don't know if you've ever heard of Rochelle Kopp. She's on Twitter a lot. She has a consulting company called Intercultural Consulting. She's got a great Twitter account. Obviously very Japan-centric, but she actually runs a whole business dedicated to making the marriage between Japanese businesses and foreign businesses work, and to figure out all the cultural shenanigans that happen when they get together. And I find she basically tweets anything related to these business and societal cross-cultural mix-ups, particularly with Japan, but also with a lot of business examples about business alliances that fall apart because they can't stand each other. And I don't know. I've met her a few times. She's fascinating. She's someone I'd love to get on the show for a discussion. Someone actually, I do retweet her a lot, so you might see stuff come up in your feed every now and then. that I retweet. But she's really cool. She's someone you should probably look up at some point as well. She's kind of a world authority on that thing.
Oh, that'll be good subject for an Asia Now podcast.
Yeah, and by the way, he got on the I think it was on the same episode as me, or was it one after? No, it was the same one as me.
That was the same one.
Michael.
Michael Chuchek. He did a little piece on that, and then we had him on for Asia Now to talk at length about the Asahi Shimbun articles.
Yeah, and he's a guy as well I'd love to get on, although actually, but I kind of picked on him a bit recently. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he probably dislikes me. Everyone on the left in Japan thinks of me as a right-wing maniac, and all the right-wing maniacs think of me as a leftist sellout, which means I'm doing it right. But yes, I'd love to get him on too. But thank you very much for coming along tonight. Always a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys all got a few more brain cells from this guy. And we will see you all here again next week at 2.5 Oyajis, which will be on this channel again next week because Victor's away. We'll get him back the week after that. And then Sunday, 11 p.m. on my channel for Tokyo Tonight. And when does Asia News Now come out next?
So Asia News Weekly drops every Friday at 12:01 a.m. The Asia Brief drops Monday through Thursday, usually before 7 a.m. And the Asia Now drops at 12:01 p.m. on Wednesdays.
Oh, you're like an amphetamine. You just generate content. And how often does it get posted on Japan Today for that?
Japan Today picks up Asia News Weekly, so they pick up the Friday podcast.
The Friday
one.
And
I think they're going, and I spoke to the editor there, and he's just trying to find a good time to put up the Senkaku episode of Asia Now that I had a few weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
Posting that one up there as well. That was a really good podcast.
But in any case, follow his Twitter. Go and check out and subscribe. He's got the best podcast, and in a way they are quasi-commercial actually. I mean, they're certainly on a commercial kind of a level actually. And you can hear the voice, right? I mean, this is a voice made for podcasting. So go and subscribe because this guy really is for covering all of Asia. And someone who's doing it really well and isn't owned by the man. I don't. Do you have any sponsors? Oh, you do. You must have some sponsors actually.
No. Actually, at this point, I don't. I haven't really pursued that option in terms of monetizing the podcast at this point.
So you can't. You can still say like screw Pepsi and
yeah,
Mountain Dew on Isis and all that.
But I wouldn't.
Of course, you never would.
Sponsor the podcast in the future.
So he's only quasi sold out at the moment. So get him while he's still only quasi. But anyway, thanks. Always a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure, my friend.
And see you all again soon, people. So see you later. Peace.
Bye.
And awkward ending. Where is the mouse thing? I gotta click.